12 months' time. The consensus amongst the 6 people who were there was that it was a very, very deserving winner of the William Hill Sportsbook of the Year in 2015. That winner is The Game of Our Lives. And this year, for the first time, we have a very smart and ridiculously heavy trophy to present to the winners. So, let's do the photos, and then I'm sure David will have a few thank yous that he wants to make.
I promise I'm not wearing rose-tinted spectacles, but I'd still rather be watching First Division football in the 60s than this overhyped, overrated product called the Premier League with its cast list of mercenaries. Am I alone in that regard?
You're definitely not alone, and what's so interesting is you're not alone in terms of your generation. And of course people, who were there first time around or something close to it have an affection for those years, but you actually find it amongst people who never went to those, who weren't born when it happened. I mean, why is it that there is still an insistence that kick-off time should be 3 p.m. on a Saturday?
Because it should.
Exactly, it should be, because people have absorbed the culture and the meanings and the emotions associated with football of the 60s and 70s, and that still lives in today's football culture, but obviously it's so much harder to make it happen because the whole thing has been shaped by the forces of commercialism, of television, and the desperately unimaginative people who run football clubs.
I went to a West London school full of Chelsea fans in the 60s and 70s. I rebelled and supported Sheffield Wednesday. So I can safely, I'm not one of those Chelsea fans of which you are not very polite about in the book, allegedly. What do you say?
I say they have a peculiar intensity of metropolitan spite. Never have I heard so much abuse heaped on people from the north of England. And what's so interesting, in such kind of, class stereotypical terms, and it is, the self-made plasterers and builders of South London who populate the shed these days, who want to take the mickey out of people from the north of England. I find it ugly. I find it really ugly, and of course the way in which they have become powerful and successful is incredibly ugly, and they're utterly unreflective about it. And this is a group of people, who are known to have anti-Semites within their number and have made anti-Semitic comments and wrote a lot of anti-Semitic letters to Abraham Grant.
But Chelsea fans aren't alone in that regard.
No, but they have a Jewish owner. About which nothing, so I'm just wondering, how do they live with that contradiction? So no, I don't like Chelsea, and I don't make any apologies for it. But then on the other hand, I would also say football needs pantomime villains. We need villains in football. It's no good what we're all going to be the angels. I mean, how dull is that? So Chelsea have their place. I don't like them, but they have very much their place in the cast of characters.
I often wonder if any of those I went to school with are there, if they could afford to. How on earth can any man on an average wage, let alone with children, afford to go to not just the Bridge, but Emirates or wherever? I don't know how they do it. How do they do it?
I read a really interesting quote by Rogan Taylor up at Liverpool John Moores University, who's been observing these things for many years, and he said a few years back, I still think it's broadly true, is that when you go to the COP at any rate, what you don't see are the prawn cocktail brigades, you don't see the upper middle classes, you see normal folks who are really, really having to stretch. So I think there's a lot of that going on. I mean, of course, if you are unemployed or you're on benefits, forget it. And certainly we know back in the day in the 1980s, 9-10% of the Division 1's audience were either unemployed or students, and now it's less than 2%. So those are the people who absolutely can't go. Then there are people who are struggling to go, and then of course the crowd has changed as Britain has changed. And the key thing is, what's the average age? Again, in the mid-1980s, the average age of Division 1 crowds was 25. It's now 47. 47, and I have to say, as a 50-year-old, bless us, we're great, but we are not a stadium full of people like me does not create the intensity and atmosphere that we all crave. football's one of the few places, not just myself, but I think we all go because it's about us, not about me. I mean, there's so much of everybody's lives are completely pointlessly filled with me. And here is this tiny, ritual, sporting, social and entertaining space that's about us. Why wouldn't you want someone next to you, even if they're really irritating?
Let's dispel some myths. Number one, Sky saved English football. Yes or no?
No.
Good. Number two, the English League is the best in the world. True or false?
What do we mean by best?
Exactly.
I think is the question.
Most exciting some weeks, but technically not the best, I would say.
You know, sometimes great. You know, the crowds continue miraculously to make a good noise. You know, we know in Italy where there is technical sophistication that we still can't really approximate to, you're dealing with, you know, 1/3 full stadiums in a desperate situation. I mean, I think a lot has to be said. Why are people not saying the Bundesliga is the best? You know, more people are going to see it. You know, there's no problem producing Champions League finalists and winners. The beer is cheaper, the food is better, the stadiums are heated, you can still stand, the singing is louder and the singing is longer, and there's more heavy metal music if that's your cup of tea too. So I would say, you know, why are we not saying, you know, the Bundesliga? I mean, it has less glamorous players overall, the bottom end is probably slightly weaker than the Premier League, but you know, I mean, I'd rather go and stand myself. So, horses for courses. You know, and the fact that in the end, you know, what is the Premier League? The Premier League is a supremely brilliant branding operation and TV rights selling business. It doesn't do anything else. That's what it's good at. So you would expect its PR to be, you know, pretty shit hot. I just don't think anybody or any of us should take it too seriously.
Myth number three then, which brings me to English football's economic success story.
For who? You know, that's the thing. I mean, in terms of turnover and money going through it, obviously it's a success story. For the sort of, you know, upper echelon of players and their agents and the various service industries that service them, it's completely fantastic. You know, if you measure it by any of the normal metrics of a successful business, like profitability or rate of return on capital or what the stock market makes of it, it's a complete and unmitigated disaster. I mean, I am not a big fan of Alan Sugar, but on this question, he absolutely got it right. He says, you know, it's the prune juice effect. Money comes in and it goes straight out the other end. And until we have some system of wage control or some sort of collective action within the Premier League, why will anything change?
Foreign owners, my club's got one now. It seems to be doing a good job so far. They're not all dodgier than Del Boy or using clubs to launder money, but some are. Yes? No?
Oh, football is a great, you know, and it's not just in Britain, all over the world. Football clubs and the lax accounting standards associated with them make for absolutely fantastic money operations. And I think here, I mean, that's a small thing. You know, maybe the guy at Birmingham, we don't really know the details. I mean, I think the issue here is not really about foreign owners. It's about owners, full stop. It's like, why should any of these dudes be allowed to own things that self-evidently, collectively produced common capital? You know? It's people's condensed memories, people's condensed emotions that is what makes Arsenal worth something. And the idea that Stan Kroenke and Walmart can own it, this is just morally absurd.